Thank you so much. Um, and yeah, I think it's a great topic that we have picked up. Charting the immersive customer experience, and we have a great panel with us. While someone has already introduced all of us our professional profiles, I would just like you to know that coming from food industry, Chandan is very passionate about food. He's a foodie. Um, and coming from the bike industry, Firefox Bikes, uh, Manika is extremely passionate about cycling, right? And I think many of you youngsters, especially if you want to get some tips around cycling, she's here after the panel. And Burhan happens to be passionate about gardening, which I think, the skill that he developed post-pandemic, just like many of us also did the same, right? Cool. Coming to the topic of charting the immersive customer experience, I think the most fundamental step towards customer experience is understanding your customers, right? How do we ensure that in a compliant manner we are able to collect customers' data and use it to derive meaningful insights, maybe by using in-house AI ML or by using third-party services, right? So I would like to start with you, Manika, given that you work with a niche industry of bikes, in that too in the premium segment. How do you sort of get this data from for your customer targeting as well as during the entire customer journey, right? Could you tell us?
Yeah. So Ankit, like you mentioned, your Firefox Bikes caters to a very premium segment. We have cycles across the premium category of cycles. For us, the primary source of data is our D2C website. So we collect a lot of first-party data from our website. Beyond that, I think the customer support, the customer service, because that's where all the customers are reaching out to you. That's another source of data for us. Besides this, we've also invested in a lot of infrastructure to connect our retail, channel, which is a combination of our company-owned stores and dealer-operated stores, to connect them on the back end so that we can potentially collect a lot of data. So yes, primarily these are the sources of data, first-party data. But beyond that, even for social media marketing, we could gather data to create lookalike audiences and reach out to them through our media campaigns.
Okay. And Manika, would you like to, for the benefit of the listeners, would you like to tell us, what are the most useful data points for running a successful marketing campaign or for designing an immersive customer experience? I mean, do you have any insight around which data points could be very useful?
See, Ankit, the odds are that your customers are today, reaching out to you or connecting with you at multiple places. So it could be your brand website, the apps that you have. It could be your social media handles, or like I mentioned, your customer support. So all these places are equally important, I must say. But what is more important is how do you really gather this data and then utilize it to create those insights which are an understanding of the end customer. So more than the channels from where you gather the data, it is about how you use this data in order to create those marketing campaigns. I think personalization and relevance of the campaigns have become very, very important, especially in terms of content. So, a customer is, the topic today is about customer service. So I think the, customer wants to have a very, very personalized and relevant experience with the brand today. It's not about, a larger narrative. It's not just about a larger narrative that the companies want to give about the brand image, but also how the brand is making me feel as a individual, right? Individual customer. So those insights, if you build them into your communication, becomes very, very important.
So if I may, reconcile what you mentioned is it doesn't matter which channel you're gathering the data from, but the understanding which is needed to crunch the data, get meaningful insights, and create use cases around it in terms of personalization is something which is going to define make or break your marketing initiatives, or be it customer support or customer experience initiatives. Let me move to Chandan with this, right? Given that you also work in a physical product sort of categories, be it food or beverages. We would also like to learn from you. What kind of data insights you gather? Where do you gather it from? I understand you've got maybe 100 million households that you are touching on an everyday basis, maybe a monthly basis. Your it's a mass product compared to, say, Firefox Bikes, which is a niche product. So we'd love to learn from you. How do you gather this data and where do you use it for?
Well, thank you, Ankit. Well, as was said, Nestle in India touches about maybe 100 million households out of the 300 million that are there in India. We connect with about maybe 350, 400 million consumers out of the 1.4 billion consumers that are there, and ever increasing all the time. And therefore, understanding those consumers, understanding those audiences are very, very important. There is no single consumer. All these millions of consumers are not the same. They're all different in various ways, and therefore understanding them, is very, very key, for which we have multiple data sources, and it's important to sort of look at the entire ecosystem of data, whether it is, first-party data, second-party data, third-party data, or sometimes even people even talk about zero-party data and so on. Now, in terms of our current sources of data, of course, our third-party data is a richer source of data, and then would be second-party data, and then would be first-party data, in a way. But we look at it holistically to see what kind of data comes in. Of course, we're interested in knowing who our consumers are, how they consume, how they shop, how they engage. And in today's world, consumption, shopping, and engagement are all different, and they're always evolving all the time. Very important also to understand consumers along the entire consumer journey. So from the point that they encounter our brands, our categories, to the time that they consider, some of our brands and categories, to the time they purchase, to, becoming loyalists, or repurchase some of our brands and so on, and then become advocates. So we look at it holistically. We have various data sources. We look at our entire partner ecosystem. We look at traditional research sources as well. We look at, new age forms of data, and we are always trying to look for what are the different, ways of data collection and the different inducements that can come in to sort of, look at the data. So it's not just about collecting the data, it's also about enriching the data, segmenting the data, understanding, what this is all about, deciphering patterns from the data, and then deploying different kinds of mechanisms to activate the data, whether it be activation from a physical sense or from a digital sense. And, we look at, again, all of it very, very holistically, and including, more, let's say, contemporary ways of artificial intelligence, machine learning, to be able to loop in the data and understand the data, and being able to deploy it for getting better bang for the buck, or for better return on investment.
Great. Great point, Chandan. In fact, may I assume that for physical sort of brands, AI ML capabilities to crunch this data, whether it's first party or second party, is more sort of outsourced and is inbuilt into various other third-party systems that you might be using? Or are you also planning to, or have you already deployed in-house AI ML capabilities for such, processing of data?
So at this point in time, a lot of our AI ML capabilities are with partner organizations, partner entities, but we do also have a few in-house capabilities around it. We collect data through our consumer engagement services, whether it's social data or whether it's first-party data and so on. Of course, the number of such data points is relatively smaller compared to more the external data points. For a lot of our sales data, for example, and various other kinds of in-house data, whether it's about supply chain, sales, and various other elements, we have in-house mechanisms to understand that data And we have a small team of, data science people who are always, together with partner agencies, they're trying to digest that data, make sense out of it, deploy some of those elements towards better logistics, transportation, supply chain, consumers, and all of that. So it's an end-to-end system. But yeah, you're right that the bias at this point in time is about, having a partner ecosystem outside. But we do have capabilities inside. Now, whether it should be outside or inside is always a big question. The way we look at it is what really gives us advantage. If something gives us advantage internally, and if it's faster and swifter and better, we go for that. And we are always looking outside to see what's the best practice and what can we bring in.
Got it. So Burhan, coming to you, when we talk about HealthPlix, it is more of a digital brand catering to a niche segment of audience, which is doctors, unlike say Nestle or Firefox Bikes, which is more of a physical products, right? So in your case, we would love to learn from you, what are the different use cases where you have started using data for redefining the customer experience, which is doctor's experience in your case?
So, just for the audience, a quick introduction about HealthPlix. It's an EMR software used by doctors. So think about it, rather than writing prescriptions on pen and paper, doctors would be entering it into their computers or application, and then giving a digital printout or just a digital copy to the patient. So that's what HealthPlix is. So now when you're marketing to a very niche audience like doctors, so we face two big challenges. The number one challenge is that the number of doctors in the country is really small, and therefore being able to do that digitally becomes really challenging. So what we had to do, in order to overcome this was create a customer single view. So we knew that we are operating in a small universe, right? And compare with millions and millions of users in the general digital population. Here you would be talking about less than 1 million doctors in India in totality. So now we said that we have to create an internal universe where we are having all the touch points related to all the doctors who have ever come to our platform in any way, or we have seen them on any of our platforms, used it anyway. And eventually, using this small set of users, all the touch points across all the mediums that we have interfaced with them for driving them to use our product eventually. So that's how our top of funnel works today. So creating a customer single view and creating this small, lead universe. The second, area in which we spend more time rather is, the real value for the product starts coming, when the doctors start using the platform. There we have a lot of applications of AI and ML, and I would like to talk about, two of them which stand out. So number one is, when doctors are moving from writing handwritten prescriptions to writing it digitally, one of the biggest inhibitions that they have is that it's going to take a lot more time. And therefore, what we do is that, we are talking about this example of Bobble AI. It's a typewriter, it's a typing tool at the end of the day. But the beauty of it is that you are not typing every key, you're not keying in every character out there. It learns from your experience, and it starts giving smart suggestions, and that starts saving time. So in order to write maybe a 50-word memo, you would be just typing in maybe 10 or 15 characters or keys. The same thing we have taken to HealthPlix for doctors writing prescriptions, where within 10 to 20 keystrokes they're able to write 80 to 100-word prescription. Now that saves time for the doctors. At the same time, the patients are getting a more detailed prescription which they deserve. So that sort of is one of the key AI applications that we have. The second AI application which we developed very recently, and it was developed in 2022 itself, was helping doctors in the real time, giving them a nudge. So when doctors write drugs, or they're writing certain medications for the patients, at times they may not be aware of there might be some adverse interactions which might happen between two drugs. So we help doctors ahead of time, just see that if there is any possible outcome in which there might be a reaction. So doctors are notified about it in real time within the platform, and that helps them in taking smart decisions. So I think along both of these things, one helping them in avoiding errors, and second helping them in doing things faster, are the two applications that we have developed.
Okay, Great. In fact, I totally relate with it, Burhan, when you mention about the number of taps saved. That happens to be even our key KPIs for customer experience team, right? How many taps were you able to save in order to deliver the same outcome, which is, let's say, a paragraph or an email or a 10-line message? I totally relate with it. Um, so coming back to you, Manika, uh, apart from data, I'm sure you would appreciate that the communication to the customers at at different points in their journey happens through content, right? And I'm sure the kind of product that you have, it must be a longer selling cycle and even longer usage cycle, post purchase usage cycle. So at different points in the customer's journey, how do you deploy and what kind of content formats and channels you use to create that immersive customer experience?
Yeah, Ankit. So, you're right that for anybody who buys a cycle, so even at the time of purchase, it's usually a month-long cycle. So when the customer is trying to explore, discover, understand cycling, understand the various categories of products, doing a competitive analysis, once the customers bought the product, there is a lot of so normally it lasts anybody anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So it's very important for a brand like us to keep the customer engaged because there is a likely repeat purchase will happen, and it will be highly dependent on the experience that the customers had over these 3 to 5 years, right? So the entire content and engagement with the customer is actually automated basis behavioral flows and basis clickstream data to give very, very personalized and relevant content. So, for example, if let's say I'm in market, I'm wanting to purchase a bike. Uh, what is my understanding on bikes? Am I a avid cyclist or am I a newbie just entering cycle? So the kind of content that we'll push out to these two set of cohorts will be very, very different. Similarly, we use automation to do predictive personalization. So if we have close to about 40% of the website visitors are actually repeat visitors. So we know their behavior, we understand, which are the other pages that they went to, and basis their behavioral flows, we recommend products, we recommend content on our website. Then post-purchase, so once I've bought a bike, there are multiple kinds of content. So, so for example, if you're in Gurgaon, Ankit is in Gurgaon, we would want you to cycle, right? You bought a cycle, but we now want you to cycle more. So we sent you, content around trails in and around Gurgaon. So that kind of personalization has become very, very critical to customer experience, and that's how you, create content which is relevant to Ankit and not to a much larger, broader audience.
It totally makes sense. And when it comes to your sort of product, I'm also curious about, what percentage of your effort goes towards digital content versus creating more, physical events or, physical inventories. What sort of percentage distribution you would typically see in your kind of brands?
So see, for us, because we cater to a segment which is largely people digital natives. So most of our content is actually digital. Yes, we do a lot of events, but in terms of the split between spends, it's growing down drastically year on year. So also because the time at hand. There was a time when a lot of cyclists used to gather together to do cycle rides. Right now, the kind of time that cyclists have at hand, they would rather have a smaller event in a closer group, which cannot be managed by brands. So it's not about creating those large events, but it's about creating avenues for them to be able to cycle more. That's the end objective. So, for example, connecting Ankit in Gurgaon to connecting Manika and Gurgaon, who both are cyclists and would want to cycle on Saturday. So that's an event, right? That's an event of relevance rather than having one big event in Pragati Maidan or somewhere. So that's the kind of transformation that that's happening in the digital ecosystem right now.
I think that's a great point that you have made. Even physical could be designed in a manner using, around use cases of networking and building a community around your brand that could be leveraged for a long term, right? Building that connection, etc. So coming back to you, Chandan, we all have historically seen different TV ads of Nestle, different documentaries and whatnot, long form content, as we say, right? What has changed over a period of time? Do you think a different content formats have now taken over the traditional ones? What's your content strategy, so to say, on top of your data strategy?
Sure. Well, our content strategy, first of all, the starting point is always an audience first strategy or understanding who your consumer is. And like I mentioned before, there are different consumers that we target for our different brands and for our different elements on the consumer journey. So increasingly, as the world is evolving, we're getting much more digital in our approach. And given that India has a pretty large millennial and Gen Z population, of course, who are much more digitally savvy, if not always digitally native. We are connecting with those consumers increasingly over the entire ecosystem of digital, using all the different platforms that we have, including local platforms, which are quite substantial. And we are also, getting much more into vernacular and all the other elements that come along with it, and not just English only or largely English-oriented content, because we do know that in India, local language is very, very important. As the digital ecosystem evolves, people are consuming much more kind of short form content. So we are pretty active in short form content. We also have long form content because sometimes telling our stories, for example, requires longer understanding. And for different brands, for example, if you look at KitKat, which is all about taking a break, we inspire people on why they should take a break and the kind of transformation a break brings in through different platforms. If it's about a cup of coffee through Nescafe, we engage on it differently. If it's about a hot steaming bowl of Maggi, we use different platforms. We also use newer forms of technology, including ASMR, for example, which brings in the sensorial values much more strongly. For a brand like Milkmaid, for example, we partner with influencer chefs. For example, with Ranveer Brar, who kind of talks about, how he can make a great set of desserts using Milkmaid and so on. And a lot of influencer-led activity is out there. So depending on different brands and different objectives and the audiences, we pretty much, our tendency is to use the full ecosystem available for us. We know that sometimes people are just on the go, so they're just flipping through their Instagram feed or their Facebook feed or looking at, shorter stuff. Sometimes it's more lean back, where you're kind of, looking at something in a little more relaxed manner. So that's where longer form of content comes in. And of course, there's increasing personalization. As you understand more and more, for example, if you look at nutrition for school-age children, and we know that mothers are very, very interested in nutrition for children at that school age, we also try to understand using AI, ML segmentation and others that there are different kinds of mums. There are some moms who are interested in how the milestones of their children are growing, how they're increasing in height and weight. There are other moms who are interested more in about, what kind of recipes and what kind of healthy foods they can provide to their children. And the children tend to be a little bit fussy eaters at that age when they are school going. So therefore, what kind of new recipes and healthier recipes that they can provide. And then there are other moms who want to stay ahead of the curve to find out what's really new in nutrition. What are the new benefits coming in? What are the new advances in science around nutrition and so on. So all these three kinds of moms, who are more interested in milestones for their children, or more interested in recipes for their children, healthier recipes, or more interested in, new and different advances in nutrition and what could be beneficial for their children. They're all different segments. And using, data and technology, we are able to serve up and increasingly address those consumers in a more meaningful way so that they actually find content which is more relevant for them. So that's our endeavor, to try and see how we can get closer to our consumers using the full ecosystem, because it's available for all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Chandan. In fact, I totally relate with that short form content thing you mentioned. In fact, at Bobble, we have the shortest form content. We call it emojis, right? How do brands can leverage these shortest form of content, which is emojis, is what we at Bobble have tried with multiple brands in the past. A follow-up question on this, Chandan. Given that now you have understanding of consumers, you know which channels they need to be targeted. You know which content needs to be created. But how do you measure the efficiency of such content that you are engaging your potential or your TG with, right? How do you measure the efficiency? How do you know whether this content strategy is working or not working?
So yeah, I mean, that's always a very important element because you do not really know whether a piece of content is useful or not unless you have measured it. And our objective is essentially to serve content which is meaningful to consumers where they are, based on who they are and when they are, right? So that's therefore, we do talk to consumers in the right way. But sometimes we have pieces of data, and sometimes I think it must be understood that while the digital world has evolved, the world of measurement has not always kept up with the advancements in the digital world. So sometimes the digital world is a little ahead of what the measurements are, but we're increasingly trying to push for more and more measurement. I think it's important that we get more and more measurement. And I must say that, there are advances in this whole area. So we have two kinds of metrics. We follow a framework called metrics that matter. Yeah, because it's important for us to understand which are those metrics that we are trying to move, which are those elements of the needle that we are trying to move, and how do we really, understand them. And we have different kinds of metrics over there, some things which are called drive metrics and some things which are called read metrics. And it's important to kind of measure, for example, if you put up a video or you put up, some content, long or short form, which is supposed to create a certain result, and you look at a simple metric like, how many people have viewed it through for how long, it does give you an indication of whether they're interested in it or not. Because today with mobile, people can really swipe up or down and move up or down and skip things or not. So those kind of metrics give us some idea of whether there is engagement. We also look at, marketing mix modeling and marketing analytics in our bigger campaigns and our more important elements to try and see, how these things are moving or not, what's the efficiency, what's the effectiveness of this. But I must say that the metric system is an evolving system, and the digital system, like for example, the emojis that you talked about are something which are very, very relevant for many of our cases because our audiences have low attention spans and they want something which is exciting and fun and really, something that they can relate with. But whether the emoji really led to a brand lift and a sales impact is something that, we are all trying to grapple with in one form or another. But it doesn't mean that we don't engage with those emojis or don't put out those emojis, because there is an engagement related with that. But the world of measurement has to, of course, go a few further steps to understand what's the real brand and sales impact.
Correct. One of my early mentors used to tell me, don't do things which you can't measure, because there's no point doing it, right? I think measurement is the key here. And in the digital world, at least, we have much better techniques or much better tools to measure our efforts compared to what used to happen in a more traditional world where it used to be a very small panel or survey-based approach, which is questionable at some times. But yeah, coming to you, Burhan, again, I'm not sure, because given your TG is in probably 30s, 40s, 50s, your audience engages with you on an everyday basis. How do you engage with them? What kind of formats of content do you use for such different kind of audience segment?
So I think we are having one of the very, very busiest people, we can call them, like doctors are extremely busy, and therefore they value their time and we value their time. Therefore, whenever we are engaging with them, I think they do appreciate, once in a while, short form contents. But what they're really interested in is that if you can tell me something which is, really going to help me improve my practice or, improve the outcomes for my patients. So they're always they always keep learning. And that's what, I could really relate to when Chandan was saying that it's always customer first, not what we as a brand think about what we should be saying, but rather what does the customer want at the end of the day. So I could quite relate to that, 3 kinds of moms example. So there are Like that, there are doctors who are early in their career and they are, they are looking at tips for, like, what are the things that they can do for increasing their business, for example. There are certain specialists who just want to know exactly if there are certain case studies which they should be looking at. And then there are, late stage doctors who just don't have time. They are so busy, they just don't have time. And therefore for them, productivity is everything. So understanding the different personas, I think that's the starting point. And then usually we take a long form content route, disseminated through webinars or one-on-one interactions. Usually we follow it up. So the strategy is that, we develop content which is long form and which can be taken to multiple mediums, and then break it down and distribute it, over a period of time. So, even the short bites of it can be created, which we distribute over a continuous frequency. But it has to be really, really deep for, for an audience like a doctor to give attention to it and spend some time on it.
Okay. Now, that's very interesting to know, Burhan. Let me move to, given the limited time, let me move to Chandan once again. Um, every brand aspires to achieve that status where they become part of their consumers' daily conversations, right? Where people relate, or rather replace the entire category with the brand itself. I remember my friend saying, "Chal, bhook lagi hai, chal Maggie khate hain," instead of saying, "Bhook lagi hai, noodle khate hain," right? Or when we go to hill stations, they have chai Maggie shop, then chai noodle shop. So how do you? We would love to hear that story. How such brands are created, which literally, takes over the entire category. Right? What is the story behind Maggie brand, Chandan?
Well, so Maggie was launched in India, maybe 25 years ago, or maybe a bit more than that, actually, about 30, 35 years ago. And, it was almost the first brand in its category to introduce the concept of instant noodles in India, something that, appeals to mothers, mothers providing to their kids something which is tasty and exciting and hot and steamy, and of course the signature taste of Maggie and all of that. And therefore it's been a part of culture and conversations, because it's a situation where, a brand finds relevance in people's lives, and the moment it finds relevance in people's lives, then people actually, get attracted to the brand and use the brand almost as the front face of what they're talking. Another example of, a particular brand, though it's a smaller brand, but a very interesting and a very important brand for us, is a brand called Milkmaid, which is, actually about sweetened condensed milk. And very few people understand what sweetened condensed milk is, but people do understand what Milkmaid is, which, kind of helps people make desserts and, different kinds of milk-based desserts and so on. So that is where, brands become so powerful and so important and so unique and so ownable in their space, that they become, more and more associated with the category and what the brand stands for, being embedded as a part of regular conversation about regular, culture, and people really embrace the signature taste or the format or the texture or something in there which really appeals to them. So it's been a long journey with Maggie, actually, and it's been built over a period of time to, various brand builders who were there, before me, before us, and so on. And nurturing such brands is very, very key. So we, as Nestle, we say that we are more than 100 years as a company, and we're looking forward to the next 100 years, trying to see how we can keep our brands relevant and meaningful and really embedded in people's lives. And that would be the kind of story for Maggie and all our brands.
Great. So Manika, unlike Maggie, which had its own set of advantages of simplicity and first mover in the category and so on and so forth, and so such a long history, in your case, Firefox Bikes, I guess the product itself is a little bit more technical, I would say, a little bit more complex, and it's a niche. It's not a mass product, unlike Maggie. So how do you pursue brand image, creating the brand image that people would connect with and would replace the entire category with, and use it in their daily conversations?
Yeah, Ankit. So, for a product like a cycle, like you mentioned, it's a little more technical. So eventual purchase and post-purchase Lot depends on the customer's experience with the brand, not just at the time of purchase, because obviously it's a product that is consumed over 3 to 5 years. A lot depends on advocacy for the product. So normally, if you were to buy a cycle, high chances that you will reach out to another cyclist that you know within your circle and ask for recommendations. You'll go on YouTube to check for recommendations. So, for a brand like us, customer experience becomes a game changer. It can be leveraged to, and that's why, customer experience and brand image for us go hand in hand and are complementary to each other, because in this hyper connected world, the customer is very less forgiving. So so if the customer wants to be and values being treated like an individual, and really values how a brand treats me as an individual, rather than a wider narrative that the companies use to communicate the brand image. So I think customer experience is extremely important for building brand image.
Okay, cool. Customer experience coupled with advocates in the form of your own customers, or be it influencers on social media, is the strategy for you. Got it. So any last comments from you, Burhan, given your brand, HealthPlix or Bobble, being digital, any sort of advice to the marketeers? How do you create that sort of brand image?
So I think one of the biggest challenges which I've seen for especially startups, and I'm sure you can also relate with it, is that extremely short on budget for creating a brand. So therefore, when you're thinking about can you go for a really big brand campaign, the answer is usually okay, we want to do it, but where's the money going to come from for this? So usually what I've seen is that some of the good startups and some of the good digital first brands, what they've done is that they try to look at every touch point with the consumer, like be it the touch point on whether it's just a message which comes after say for example buying the bike. After that, what happens, versus when you have just made an inquiry about something, what happens. So all those touch points, every touch point can be used as a way to give a message around what your brand stands for. And good brands create a mark on each of these trails that you have available. So think of it like every touch point that I have, like when someone calls up the number that I have put up on my website, what is it that they're going to hear? Like at the bottom of every email that's going out, what is it that we are going to say? So usually, in my opinion, I try to anchor on each and every touch point that we have with the consumers, so to create an impression of what this brand stands for. And I think that is done well for us at at the budget that we operate.
I totally relate with the budget constraint, Burhan. In fact, we always tell our team, how do you convert your existing users into your brand ambassadors? Because that is the biggest leverage we have got when we don't have the budget to spend on mass branding campaigns. Yeah, thank you so much, Chandan, Manika, and Burhan, for joining us today. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ankit.